you for the kind invitation. The Cairo Forum is a flagship event for those who want to have a public policy discussion on economics and policy. I'd like to add on a personal note, I'm very happy to see Dr. Abdel-Latif as the director of ECES, because on the one hand, it shows that Egypt is gender sensitive, but more importantly, that our choice was based on merit, not on trying to be gender appropriate. So thank you for your presence and your work here. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to talk to you at a time of extraordinary sensitivity and complexity, at a historical juncture where the international order is in complete flux, and when our region, the Middle East, is undergoing a profound process of change and reformation, which will shape its destiny for generations to come. We meet not simply to observe events today, but to reflect together on them, and to try to develop collective responsibilities and paths forward for our peoples and our nations on how we might transform today's challenges into tomorrow's opportunities, and how we can convert instability into a chance to rebuild a fairer, more secure, and more stable regional order. Since the end of the Cold War, the world has lived through waves of transformation. But today, we face something different altogether: the erosion of the very foundations of international order. The bipolar system gave way to unipolarity, and now to a fluid, contested, and unpredictable landscape where no single pole has unilateral conclusive sway, and where rules are applied selectively, often to the weak, but rarely to the powerful. The institutions that were built to uphold collective security have faltered. The UN Security Council is paralyzed by deep divisions among the major powers. International law is routinely violated in broad daylight. Military force is employed preemptively outside legitimate frameworks. Arms races, both conventional and nuclear, are accelerating once again. Meanwhile, global challenges intertwine with these crises. Climate change threatens water and food security for billions. Mounting debt is suffocating developing countries. The digital and technological divide is widening inequality. And recurrent humanitarian catastrophes expose the fragility of global governance. In short, we are witnessing a world where power often precedes principle and interests overrides justice. International legitimacy has become selective. This growing imbalance is eroding trust in the very idea of a rules-based order. At such a time, I want to underline a point made by previous speakers. The global south, in the wider definition, those who are not considered to be major powers, whether they are of one bloc or the other, or originally of the non-aligned countries, they must rise together to restore the balance, to reassert many of the principles that we ourselves started 70 years ago at Bandung. 70 years ago, young leaders from countries that were neither rich nor strong stood up and told the world without hesitation, we want more equality, we want more sovereignty, we want non-interference, and to demand an international order that treats all nations with equal dignity. We never claimed that we were all equal, but we wanted to be dealt with in a fashion that meant we were all dealt with in equal dignity. The Middle East, my region, the region for most of you here, is amid this turbulence not a passive observer, but a central theater in which global rivalries, regional ambitions, and local aspirations intersect. What we are missing is not a sense of isolated crisis, but a structured reconfiguration, a deep shift in power balances, identities, and alignments that will redefine our region's political map for many, many years to come. Three trajectories stand out clearly. First, the redistribution of regional power. New players are emerging to fill the vacuum left by traditional powers in the past. Middle Eastern nations are asserting themselves with greater independence and flexibility. Yet this very dynamism has triggered new rivalries as well, from the Gulf to the Levant, from the Red Sea to North Africa and beyond. Second, the collapse of traditional security frameworks. For decades, our region relied, regrettably, too much on external powers for its security. That overdependence has not produced stability. In many cases, it has deepened fragility. No sustainable order can rest on the shoulders of those outside. What we lack and urgently need is a regional security architecture based on mutual confidence and collective responsibility. Third, the struggle over identity and alignment. We see competing efforts to redefine what the Middle East actually is, with a particular objective of diluting the Arab identity into a vague Middle Eastern construct, shaped most of all by non-Arabs in our region. At other times, replacing long-standing culture and political bonds with short-term transactional arrangements. If we do not define our own future, others will define it for us, and not necessarily in accordance with our people's aspirations. The lesson is clear. This is not a predetermined fate, but a historic opportunity. The Arab world has the geography, the resources, and above all, the people to be a decisive actor, provided we act with purpose and realism. In that context, no discussion of international order or regional transformation can be complete without addressing the Palestinian question. And this is the true litmus test for global justice. 75 years after the Nakba, the Palestinian people continue to suffer occupation, displacement, and systematic violations of their fundamental rights. Despite numerous UN resolutions affirming their right to self-determination and statehood, implementation remains hostage to political paralysis and double standards. This hypocrisy is not merely a moral failure. It is a structural wound to the international system itself. A world that allows perpetual occupation and daily injustice cannot credibly speak of law or equality. Self-determination, sovereignty, and non-discrimination demand a consistent position, which ends occupation, which recognizes the state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, and activates mechanisms of accountability for violations of international law. If the world truly wishes to rebuild trust in global governance, Palestine, in our region, must be the starting point. Just for a few seconds, let me dwell on the Gaza agreement. In recent weeks, a fragile but what I consider to be a potentially significant development took place. The agreement between Israel and Hamas regarding Gaza, which basically can be summarized into a ceasefire and the release of some hostages and incarcerated on both sides, among other issues. This agreement was brokered by Egypt, Qatar, the US, and Turkey, and held two celebrations. One in one in Jerusalem, and the other in Sharm el-Sheikh. These ceremonies were complex, but they require a sober reading and cautious analysis. In Jerusalem, the event was dominated by American and Israeli politics, focusing on a narrative that leaned heavily towards the Israeli right, including specific references to moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing the Golan, among other things. It was a performance in domestic politics for both America and Israel. not a roadmap for peace. By contrast, the gathering in Sharm el-Sheikh told a different story. The heads of state of the 4 countries I mentioned were there to sign a declaration for peace, and in their presence on that occasion were 30, 40 other heads of state and government or ministers. At Sharm el-Sheikh, the only substantive speech given in the event was by President Sisi of Egypt. And he tried to package the whole agreement together and give it an interpretation. He started off with the issue of a ceasefire and ended clearly with all of the foreign heads of state and government standing there, including Donald Trump, saying that this has to end with a 2-state solution, with Palestine living side by side and in peace with Israel. Now, that being said, my first reaction to the agreement was, we can finally stop the death and destruction. I mean, the human losses were just beyond looking at this cynically and believing you can negotiate endlessly for more. But at the same time, having been in government service for a long time, I tend to look 2 steps down the road with every proposal being made to us. And in looking at the agreement, I metaphorically described it as a framework agreement written in pencil. And my point really here is, it is a framework agreement lacking much detail. If properly interpreted, it could lead in the right direction. But there will clearly be negotiations as we go along. And that's why it's a framework. And it's written in pencil, because if you leave anything for too long, the latter parts of the agreement will be lost as the lead on the paper loses its focus. And you look at the agreement itself, it's very clear on the hostage exchange and ceasefire. In the middle, it's less clear in terms of the security arrangements, etc. And at the very end, it talks about creating the environment for the fulfillment of the aspirations of the Palestinian people in very, very vague language. Nevertheless, so let me say the following. I consider it to be useful, but we need to do a lot to make it actually implemented in the concrete, faithful manner. To do that, 3 things, at least, actually 4 things, need to be done. First of all, it has to be given international consolidation. What was agreed upon, with the interpretations given by the Egyptian president and the commitments made by President Trump to the Arab and Muslim states in New York when he presented the proposals, need to be codified at the Security Council. Now, some of you may think, well, Russia and America won't agree. They actually might. I was in Russia recently, and Putin actually said this might be a possibility to move forward. But that being said, you can't arrange for security arrangements, international forces, reconstruction, without everybody getting some sort of guarantee that this is serious. Secondly, there has to be sustained humanitarian support. The destruction in Gaza is enormous. It's not going to be resolved with short-term ad hoc processes. Thirdly, there cannot be permanent Israeli military presence in Gaza. The withdrawals can be gradual, but they have to be sustained, and they have to end beyond the borders of Gaza. Most of my friends here know that I'm not naive. I'm already worried by the statements made by the Prime Minister of Israel, where he redefined and reasserted again that Israel would have the upper hand in security as they move forward and would not withdraw from Gaza completely, even at the last stage. Fourthly, we cannot ignore what's happening in the West Bank, where more land is being eaten up, where more violence is being used against Palestinians. This is not a tactical measure. It's a predetermined step, a predetermined policy by several in Israel to try to end the Palestinian aspirations completely, whether it was originally by deportation or by annexing territory. Let me move quickly to a number of other issues. We've talked a lot about the peace process, and it deserves, as I said, our priority. But let me forewarn you, if we don't lead with regional, we don't also think seriously about regional asymmetries and other regional problems, we will pay serious consequences. There was serious concern about the Iranian nuclear program, where Iran has not fulfilled its obligations with the IEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. Those are legitimate. Where it has, the concerns are not legitimate. But do not forget, the only country in the Middle East that is not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty is Israel. The only one. Actually, Iran has ratified all the treaties and all the safeguard agreements. If we do not deal with that issue, this is going to come back and bite us in the face. And let me remind all of you, Egypt and Iran, over almost 50 years now, proposed back in 1974 the creation of a zone free of nuclear weapons in the Middle East. Finally, in my concluding remarks, the Arab world. I seriously believe that the Arab world today is at crossroads. The region faces crisis, but that should not be our destiny. The fragmentation of the Arab identity, the erosion of sovereignty, the intrusion of external factors have all taken their toll. All of these can be addressed. We possess strategic geography connecting three continents. We command vast energy and natural resources. We have a youthful population capable of innovation and growth. We hold a culture and civilization legacy that can project soft power and inspire unity. To harness these assets, we must act on 5 fronts. Recognize our challenges honestly and address them with political courage. Embrace continuous national and regional reform to keep pace with global technology and economic challenge, and to encourage all of the components of our societies to engage in building the future. Move from rhetorical unity to practical integration in politics, security, and economics. Strengthen national institutions to ensure independent decision-making. Over-dependence on anybody, including your friends, is ultimately detrimental. This also applies, by the way, the issue of reform and strengthening institutions to the regional institutions. And invest in human capital, and I'm very glad that we've heard this over and over again today. Ladies and gentlemen, history offers no pause. Either we shape the future or we are shaped by it. The choice is ours. I have sought today to draw a broad picture of the international and regional landscape, its turmoil, its transformations, its dangers, and its rare openings. The world around us is being remade. The Middle East is being redefined. Our place will be defined not by what others do, but what we decide to do and how we do it with foresight and effective cooperation. Reclaiming initiative is not a task for one nation, but a collective responsibility, requiring shared, not unique or unanimous visions, shared visions of political will and credible mechanisms for execution. It begins with trust among ourselves, then with our direct neighbors, then with the larger region at large. Let us draw inspiration once again from the Bandung principles, not from the consequences, but from what they called for then. Because I very often hear, realistically speaking, can we influence the international norms in that respect? Well, we were poorer, younger, and more dependent 70 years ago, but our leaders came out and said, what we want is dignity and independence. They did not claim to be the mutual source of wisdom, nor did they want to have an exclusive patronage, but they simply wanted to be treated fairly. And I think that's something we have the right to demand now.
The hour has come to act together, wisely and decisively, to shape a Middle East that honors its history and safeguards its future, a region that contributes to a just, balanced international order where no nation's fate is dictated by others. Thank you very much.